Hey, what's going on? Just gonna make a video about typology used in business because, okay, how can I use typology productively to build organizations? And I love that. Something that I'm really passionate about, and I use all the time quite efficiently. And it's great because I find if you can understand people better, then you can interact with everyone just much more efficiently in all kinds of ways. So what I'm going to go into various types of systems and then talk about how I use each one. I know many systems rather well. I'm not a true master of any of them. You could say jack of all trades in a way, but at the end of the day, my mastery is really around building organizations that make impacts that I'm excited about. So that's what I'm mastering, and this is sort of a bunch of tools that I've adopted to fulfill the things that I like to do. So the first one I'm going to go into is Enneagram. Enneagram is a system that I love and I've definitely gotten very into. Enneagram is a lovely system where it pretty much goes into what in your life led to you being the way that you are, like kind of on a deep emotional level. That's kind of a goofy way to explain it. But for example, like what are sort of the core wounds in your life almost that like maybe it kind of goes into your trauma a little bit more than many different type systems do. And then it'll go into your strengths and weaknesses and things that you fear and things that you would love that you do very well as well. Personally, I'm an 837, 8-wing 7, have a lot of 3, and also have quite a bit of 1 in there. If you look at the scores, like if I take a test, the things that come up, I go 8, and then 3 is like right there with 8, and I'm an 8 though. And then after that, I actually score 1, and then I score a 7. But the way they do their types, it's 837 because there's 3 triads. There's the way that kind of like your gut triad works, which is also kind of like your action triad. Essentially that's the idea. The idea is like the way you're taking action, which I'm an 8. It's kind of that. Then there is sort of the way that you are thinking, or the thinking triad, which is a 7, which I have a 7 for that. And then there's also kind of like your emotional triad, which I have a 3. 3 is an achiever, 8's a challenger, kind of like a boss too, like a leader type. And 7 is like a variety-seeking, kind of intellectual, success-oriented type too. So I'm 837, which is triple assertive. You can take that test and you can really use it well to understand kind of like the deep things that are going on with people. And if you're going to like really trigger someone, it's a useful thing for that. Lately, I've been getting really into Jungian depth psychology, which is like kind of like Myers-Briggs. It's going to use the 4. It's going to use I'm an ENTJ, so it's going to use that code. But I've really been enjoying depth psychology because the thing about so Enneagram is very much like kind of your patterns of what's going on with you, very much on like a trauma level, really. Like that's really what's going on, and how you kind of cope with the world and how you like to deal with the world is Enneagram. While what you're going to get with Jungian depth psychology is like very complex. Like I think it might be the most complex of any system that I understand. But also it is super useful and very full circle. Like it really goes into a lot of things. Like it goes into things you're really skilled at as well, like Enneagram. It does it even better though, I think, for roles and jobs and that kind of thing. And then it also, what you're going to get is, like you probably have taken the 16 personality type test if you're watching this video. And you're going to get like, you're going to get your 4-digit code. Really though, if you get into it, you'll learn about cognitive functions. I recommend looking at C.S. Joseph and just starting from the beginning of his seasons. He's really good at Jungian depth psychology, so highly recommend him. And yeah, so this is really good as well for just understanding people. Like if I have an important meeting, I'll type somebody and then I'll understand where they're going to be coming from, what's really going to matter to them, what's not really going to matter to them, what's going to what are this person's values going to be, and then how can I help them get to where they want to be. Also, just typing your friends, even, it's like, okay, one of your friends asks you for advice. Hey, what should I do here? Or a business partner. Hey, what should I do here? And you can really understand like the strengths, weaknesses, where someone's going to be really strong, where someone's going to be really weak. So that's very useful as well with that. Some simpler ones, if you want to type people really easy, DISC is great. DISC is wonderful where I'm a DI. So kind of primarily D, which is like a challenging, achievement-oriented type. And then also I, which is influence, which means I don't know, like to have nice things and enjoy myself and be kind of upbeat and extroverted and that kind of thing. The DISC is really simple, so I can quickly cover it. D is sort of like, challenger, get shit done, competitive type. I is they're kind of status driven and enjoy. Like you'll see a lot of sales guys will have I, for example. Like you think a salesperson, that it's really extroversion is very highly correlated with I. And then what you'll get as well is DIS. S is like it's highly correlated. I'm using different type systems to explain type systems, so I'm sorry, but it's highly correlated with agreeableness. I would say so. It's like people that they like stability, they like relationships. They like people. You're gonna get that with S, like a lot of stay-at-home moms or counselors or that kind of thing would score high on S. And then you got C, and C is all about. I think you might call it C. I'm not a master in any of this. Probably like conscientiousness or something like that. It's basically, and it's not Big Five conscientiousness, but it's basically like you like details, you like diving deep on things. It's like an analytical type. They're very analytical, or C's. They're kind of builders. So it's great because you're talking to someone with DISC, especially if you're doing sales or hiring or something quick, and you want to get like a really quick slice. It's only got 4, and you can be like, okay, is this person extroverted, introverted? If they're C, they're probably going to be kind of more introverted. If they're I, they're going to be more extroverted. And there's a bunch of traits that go with that. And then if they're D or if they're S, and you can just understand people quickly, like what their worldview is going to be with that. So I find it very useful. So the reason you'd use DISC is because it's like a really quick thin slice that helps you understand people. So if you're like, hey, I just want to thin slice people really fast and understand what's going on, then you probably want a DISC. If you want to understand people really deeply, I would go Jungian depth psychology. It's the most complicated, and it's very full circle. If you want to understand people's kind of like traumatic patterns and stuff, like for counseling, or like if you want to help someone work through trauma or something like that, Enneagram's like really great. It's great for all kinds of things, but I think it really shines there. If you want to hire someone and go, hey, if I have this job and I really want to find, like, how can I match this person to the perfect role and make sure that I'm making the right hire with the right temperaments for this role, I think Kolbe is very strong. Kolbe is a system where you're going to get, there's 4 different temperaments. Here, let's see if I can get this one right. Basically, there's 4 different sort of like, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain Kolbe. I'm really just shooting this off of the hip here. So the way that the best way to explain Kolbe is like the way that you interact in the workplace. So you could be, they've got there's got 4 colors. There's orange, basically there's, okay, so what I am, right, is I'm a high fact finder and I'm a high quick start, which means that I'm really good at like understanding. I love to like take in information, understand how things work. And then what I also like to do is take action and begin things. I also am rather low on implementer because there's 4. Implementer is like how much you like to use systems. Because I'm low on implementer, it actually means that I just like to subvert systems rather than set systems up and have people follow the systems, or even like personally follow the systems. Like I like to build my own little mini system and just like kind of hack my way through things, which is great as like kind of a lone thing, but it makes me not as good at managing people closely. So useful thing to understand about yourself and others. Like for example, I love to work with partners or hire people that take a role like a chief operating officer, and I often take kind of a more visionary leadership role, just because it's like, well, I understand that I'm a great fact finder. I'm really good at finding the right thing to do, and then also kind of getting things going. And then if I want someone, to turn a crank and then watch someone turn that crank, then I need to get a high implementer. You know what? I'm talking about the blue one, and the blue one is it's actually follow through. So I'm talking about follow through. I'm so sorry. First video, and I'm just breaking down a whole bunch of different things at once. But I do the point here though is that what you can do is you can understand there's the orange one, which I always get implementer and follow through mixed up, because to me they sound, the thing is I'm used to visionary integrator from Rocket Fuel, which is a whole nother fucking system of how to get CEOs to interact with their COOs. So it gets twisted up in my mind. Implementer are people that are good with like their hands and doing things like wood shop and that kind of thing. And if you have a high implementer score, you like to do things hands-on. And if you have a low implementer score, mine's relatively low, you're much better conceptually. So you can explain what needs to be done, while the implementers are good at actually doing it with their hands, like they're hands-on workers. Like a carpenter would have very high implementer. Yeah, so anyway, that's Kolbe, very useful. Basically, the point of Kolbe, though, is you figure out how people work, and that's really good for hiring and putting people in the right places. It's not as good for like understanding what people need and what would be really exciting for people and light them up. Often, actually, having people work where their Kolbe would be will make them happier because they're in their kind of zone of genius. Always want to get your staff to work in their zone of genius, or your teammates or your partners to do that. So where are we at? So just to recap, we've done Enneagram, we've done so Enneagram, really good for counseling situations, understanding people, it's really good for that, understanding what makes people tick and what are people's kind of hang-ups. Depth psychology is probably the most comprehensive, and DISC is the quickest, easiest to type people. Kolbe is going to be the most specific for how people are going to effectively work. Where are we at? So we're at those four. And there's also like Big Five is great. There's tons of resources out there for Big Five. Big Five is really simple, so it's easy to measure, in my opinion. Like there's a lot of, like, people say all the typologies are like psychologists will say that these typologies aren't scientific. I don't know if they're scientific, but they're effective. Like you can use it and you can really quickly type people through all of them, and they all correlate very strongly with each other. So you can use them all in conjunction, and often if I know one type, I'll think to someone, oh, well, they're a DI, so that highly correlates with, in Myers-Briggs, they'll be probably an extroverted type, and it's funny. Yeah, and there's other things you can do, like maybe they'd be like a control type. If you get into more of C.S. Joseph's work, you'll be like, oh, okay, I know what control types are. Ds are probably usually control types or wayfarers. That's a whole rabbit hole. Honestly, depth psychology is a lot. And then you can also go, okay, well, if they're a D in Enneagram, they're going to be an 8-3 or a 7 most of the time. So it's fun. Like you can just kind of put them across each other. And then once you know all of them, which you don't need to do, you can just learn one. It's very intimidating to learn them all. Part of what is useful in this video is to figure out which one to start with, because if you're trying to use it in your business, then you got to start somewhere. So yeah, that's what those are. Big Five is great as well. I think I use it less in business. I'll explain it a little bit. Really like Jordan Peterson's Understand Myself. I think that is the best one that I've come across for Big Five, because it's more like Big Five, and then it splits any of the five. Like for example, for extroversion, right? There'll be extroversion and enthusiasm, and then for like conscientiousness, conscientiousness is a really good one for me, because I usually have kind of like a high medium conscientious score, like 75% percentile. But if you get into industriousness, I'm at like the 92nd percentile. I'm super industrious, but I'm also rather disorganized, right? So it's kind of a funny thing. So that's a really good one as well. Big Five's great. Understand Myself by Jordan Peterson's great. I don't use it so much in work, but I would imagine that you would want to work with people that were high in conscientiousness and low in neuroticism. That would be great. And, yeah, pretty much. And there's other good information. There's openness and all that. And I'm very high in openness and very high in extroversion. And for disagreeableness is really interesting too, the way that they break it down with Jordan Peterson's, because if you're disagreeable, so there's politeness, which I'm like comically low on. I'm comically impolite. And then also I'm actually quite high in compassion, which is rather interesting. So it's like I'm very blunt, but I also actually care more because it's actually interesting. Like you can break it down by male and female, and women on average, not every individuals spread everywhere, women are more compassionate than men on average. So I am like I'm quite a lot more compassionate than the average man, actually. Like I'm always trying to look out for other people and figure out like what's good for everybody involved. But I'm comically impolite, so I'll just speak my mind and tell you whatever. Because I probably have mild Tourette's, honestly. So yeah. So those are some good personality systems. Yeah, and depends on what you need. Depends on what you want. If you're hiring, I would use Kolbe. Sales, I'd use DISC. If you want to really, really, really understand people, I think I would go depth psychology. If you want to understand people very well as well, I could use Enneagrams. Enneagram's also great to understand people rather deeply. Both depth psychology and Enneagram go quite deep into people's psyches. So yeah, those are various ways. Ask me questions in the comments if you have any. It's my first video on typology. Might be my only video on typology, but just felt inspired to shoot something because I've been learning a lot about typology, using it in business. Actually, really quick, I'll just talk about a couple ways I use it. So yeah, you can use it in sales. You meet someone, you just want to understand what they need, really. Because again, sales is really just a matter of like, what does somebody need? How do I get them that thing? Like that's how I see sales, honestly. You can kind of break it down to that. And you can always be really, you could be out there selling used cars and things like that. And then you might need to use a lot of tactics and tricks, but I find what's most useful is honest enthusiasm and problem solving. And as long as you are as long as you're in control of the product development process, which I almost always am, I just can design things that people want. And I think that's a great way to do business because you're actually solving people's issues. I think that's almost like the point of business, to be honest. I think if you're doing anything other than that, we should tax you more. Yeah, anyway, so that's really useful. Definitely hiring. You can use Kolbe and things like that. And it's funny because you can even just use this understanding of people. It's like, hey, like you should go meet that girl because I think you could do it because I know you. And I think that you're doubting yourself in this way, but you would really do really well this way. And I think you just understand people better. And then they go and they meet that girl and it goes great. And it's like, saw that coming because I understood you and I understood the situation, and you can just sort of make predictions with things because you understand all the interactions of how things are going around you. So that's great. Yeah, sales, friendships, hiring, relationships, understanding your partner, especially you get into things like Enneagram, especially with the partner, and then you can really understand what they're concerned about and what's going on and what their kind of fundamental patterns are, so you don't trip over them. So that's useful. Anyway, shot this video, and I think that's enough for now. But quick breakdown of the different styles, and we'll help you pick what to start with. All the best. Hope you're well. Lots of love.